Hi, my name is Rebecca Thompson Hitt. I'm the founder and executive director of the Consciously Parenting Project, and this is the Consciously Parenting Podcast. We're going to be talking with parenting visionaries, professionals, and parents to guide you and inspire you to be the most connected parent you can be. Today I'm talking with Tracy Cassels of Evolutionary Parenting. We've been talking about attachment, and this is our second conversation in our series. Today we're going to be talking about the most important elements of attachment for parents with children of all ages. I know there's a lot of confusion about attachment and what that really means. And so I wanted to look even a little bit at, we have this idea of attachment parenting, which was coined by Dr. Sears, which is not the same as attachment in the research. So I wanted to talk about that and clarify some things there.
Absolutely.
Good place to start.
It's a good one. Well, it's really important. It's funny. As I was saying to you kind of offline before, there's an article that's made the rounds relatively recently, and it had to do with the idea that somehow attachment parenting is privileged, that it's only for well-to-do individuals who can, respond to their children's needs. And it is so unfortunate that we've hit a stage in society where we really believe that to provide our children with a secure attachment is something that can only be done via privilege. Because I will admit, I think there's elements that make it harder, and we can talk about that. With the way society is structured and returning to work and financial insecurity and all these kinds of things. But by and large, secure attachment requires very little from parents. So from a material perspective. So yeah, I think stepping back here. So I think I want to get away from what people seem to think about it to get to what it is. And although there's all this ideas, it has to be breastfeeding, everything, bonding, baby wearing, whatever the 7 B's of the attachment parenting world. Right. I've always said you just ditch them. That's not what attachment is in terms of attachment theory. The attachment, when we look at theory on all of this and the research on it, is that it's simply responsiveness specifically to distress. So we're not even talking about warmth, although clearly being warm and loving to your child is an important element of your relationship. However, it's the way in which we respond to them when they are upset, when they're afraid, when they are feeling anxious, when they're angry, how we're able to be in tune with them at that point and help them through those periods. That is responsiveness, and that is what builds secure attachment. So when we think back to like the early infant, they cry a lot to tell us everything. And they have lots of needs that all need to be met. And so at that point, there is a lot of, one-on-one time you need to spend with your baby.
Right.
And that's where we get into this issue of potentially a bit of privilege. If you can stay home for longer periods, that's easier. If you live in a country like I do in Canada, where we have a year's maternity leave, well, that's a lot better for families to be able to build this attachment than if you're back at work at 3 weeks or 6 weeks or 12 weeks.
Right.
So that really makes it easier because young children can't do much for themselves. And they are relying upon you to kind of problem solve for them through it. So you have to listen to them and you have to respond accordingly, whether it's feeding, whether it's a diaper change, whether it's getting them outside to get some fresh air, doing a bath, and so on. These are the things that you respond to when they're upset. But as they get older, this changes a bit more. So they may cry and be upset because you took a toy away. They may cry because they can't get a new toy. Now, attachment parenting isn't giving in. It's still acknowledging there's a need underlying that upset, and it's often a need for comfort. And so whether or not you breastfed or did anything else, you can always still be there in that need. There's also feelings of anxiety. So our children go through periods of separation anxiety. Typically starting around 8 months, and it can last up to 18, 19 months. And during this time, they want to be close to you. And there's a plethora of reasons in terms of cognitive development and social development that explain why this is a very stressful period for them. And I won't get into all of those here, but suffice it to say that it is very natural for them to go through this. And unfortunately, this is a time when parents are often pushing independence. And yet it's the time when they need us to actually be there and acknowledge their stress and be there as much as we can. And make sure that they're in a safe space when we can't be there with other people that are being responsive to them. So really, when it comes down to building attachment, it's all about responsiveness. And it varies how in tune we are, how responsive we are to our kids. Doesn't mean you have to breastfeed. It doesn't mean you have to baby wear. It doesn't mean you have to bed share. Those things can make it easier. And as someone who does them, you can say, oh my God, it's so much nicer than just because it's a lot easier. And if you have a child who's very high needs, that makes it even easier.
I don't think I would have made it through my parenting with my high need kid if I hadn't been doing those things. Yeah, exactly.
And so that's the thing that we sometimes forget is people that often fall into the quote unquote attachment parenting have higher needs children. So these are ways in which it's easy to address that very high needs child. And importantly, for those high needs kids, the secure attachment is actually more important than for more easygoing children. When we look at the research, we find that children who have this kind of, the research can call it more difficult temperament or higher needs or more intense children, they have far worse outcomes when they don't have secure attachment than children who are easygoing and have insecure attachment.
Right.
They also tend to do much better with secure attachment than easygoing children with secure attachment. So they kind of fall on two ends of the spectrum, where they can either really thrive with it or really struggle with it.
Right. Wow. Yeah, and those are the kids that are just, they take a lot of you.
Yes.
And a lot of my parents, also the ones that I work with, have kids who are high need. That's why they're coming to see me. What do I do? I'm pulling my hair out. I don't understand what,
Yeah.
Yeah. And it becomes easier to do those kinds of things. Here, just sleep in my bed. Please, just go to sleep. Just go to sleep.
And they do with you. And that's, it's not a bad thing. That is being responsive to their need. Now, I've met families who also have high needs where bed sharing was not a possibility.
Right.
For many reasons, all of them valid. And in those cases, you still have to find another way to make them feel safe and secure. Right. So that's really, when we get down to it, it's behaviors that help our children feel safe and secure. And if we look at it from our own perspective, I mean, I, at least personally, have never felt safe and secure being abandoned in a scary situation.
No, me neither.
Right? If you think about it, if you face something really terrifying and you look to the person who's supposed to be helping you and they say, check you later.
Good luck with that.
You're kind of like, wow, and screw you. And we have cognitive capacities that our kids don't have. So, even when I make analogies like that, I've had people say, oh, well, I've had hard situations and I feel even that much better for figuring it out. Right. Well, our children aren't figuring it out. That's the whole problem. They don't have that developmental capacity, the neurological capacity to quote unquote figure it out. What their body does instead is start to shut down.
Right.
So we hit, when our children aren't responded to, this is why we hit these different types. Depending on what happens, you see different types of insecure attachment. So I know we talked about, secure attachment last time. And I think when we think about these behaviors, it's important to look at, the types of insecure attachment because, children can, there's three different types. The first is anxious. And these are the kids that are clingy beyond belief to their parent. The parent goes away and they are hysterical. They're upset. When the parent comes back, they can't comfort them. So, most of the time we've defined our childhood behavior by the use of Mary Ainsworth's strange situation in which a child is left alone with a stranger for a period, and they assess both the child's behavior while the parent's gone and how the child responds when the parent returns.
Right.
So that's why I say a child that is very upset when the parent leaves, but also very upset when the parent returns. They may cling, but they get upset, but they're not comforted. And we often see a lot of this from parents that are almost too clingy to their children. They're the ones not really letting their kids go free. They're telling them it's unsafe. They have kind of inappropriate boundaries with them.
Right.
The avoidant is the child who just seems to not care about their parent. The parent is gone. They look like they don't care. The parent returns again. They look like they don't care. And in one sense, I think for the long time, we thought these were kids that just, okay, they're cool. They're not bothered by anything.
Right.
And the hardest part is we discovered when people started being able to measure physiological responses, we saw that on the outside, they looked exactly like they didn't care. On the inside, they were equally distressed as the children that were screaming.
Right.
So you see that they have this very nervous sense. The parent is not comforting, and they know to stay away. They're afraid of the parent in many ways. So you can see, and the thing is that we don't have to see this in terms of abuse either, right? Kids can feel this way if they just don't feel like they're going to be made to feel safe.
Right.
And then the last is disorganized, and there you get a mix. There is no real pattern. And again, this comes with parenting behaviors that often have to do with abuse and addictions, where parents are erratic in their own behavior. And so a child doesn't know, can I come to you? Can I not? Are you, one day you're letting me run free, the next you're clingy. They don't know what's up or down. Right. And in turn they respond. And I think when people hear about these types of attachment patterns and they think, well, being responsive, of course, aren't most of us, right? You look around at most parents and everyone you know, and you go, come on, okay, so they did cry it out. So they did whatever. By and large, shouldn't the vast majority of children be securely attached based on this idea of what it really responds to? If we're talking about just responsiveness, shouldn't they be? And unfortunately, the most recent research we have is that only 60% of kids are securely attached. Right. And I think this really speaks in our society to these parenting practices, how much we're ignoring how these practices lead to kind of this detachment from our kids. So these very common practices like cry it out and everything. And I'm not saying cry it out leads to insecure attachment.
Right.
What I'm saying is that it's one behavior that really is detaching. And so depending on a host of other factors, we may or may not run into problems for a given child. And we have too many of these patterns of behavior in parents and a society. This is where we get to the privilege that does affect it, is, you have a society where people are back at work too early. They're not given appropriate support. So parents are highly stressed themselves, and our kids are picking up on that stress. And that can limit attachment, because if you're around a caregiver that's always stressed out, you're not feeling safe.
Right.
And if a parent is stressed out about meeting their own basic needs, they can't then go and meet the basic needs of the child they're caring for. So those are the areas where I think we really, as a whole of society, have to look at, as well as looking at the individual parenting practices and how they affect individual children. Right.
Because there is such a huge societal issue here, because parents are so under-supported. And then there are all these ripples. And then we look, as you said, at the individual child and how that child is internalizing what's happening. The parenting practices, the stress of the parents, all of those things, because they're part of our lives. So it's not, okay, well, we're all doomed, well, we're all stressed out and we don't have enough support. So, it's really looking at what we can do. I'm living in Mexico right now, and I'm seeing so many families, and I'm living in a very poor area of Mexico. I'm in Oaxaca, and it's the poorest state in Mexico. And I'm looking at all of these people who, many of them don't have a lot, but they have community, they have each other, they're holding their children, they're interacting with their children. There's so much richness, and it's not about the material at all. It's about all of these other things, and these are things that we can control. If we're working, we can come home and spend time with our kids, connecting with them, holding them, smelling them. If my 18-year-old would probably take offense if I smell them. He probably doesn't smell very good anymore, but like at certain ages and stages, that's an appropriate thing to do.
Yes, exactly. That's it, is that it's, too often we focus on the material. We focus on, we need to get our kids the newest gadgets, the newest this, the, private schools, this, that, the other. And, that doesn't lead to greater happiness. It doesn't lead to greater emotional well-being. No. Attachment, we talked last week about the correlates and stuff, and, later emotional well-being and relationship building is linked to secure attachment. And in nowhere is all these other things, this monetary, material stuff that we're so focused on in our society, nowhere is this linked to attachment.
Right. Nowhere is it, you must have an iPad.
Exactly. Your child must have an entire toy room and new clothes. But we do think about this. They don't need vacations. Right. They don't need a 5-bedroom home. Right. They don't need their own bedroom. Right. Even at the beginning. These are all things that we've internalized in our society as being necessary. And yet really they aren't as necessary as the relationship we're building with them, of having that time with us. And, there's so many, as you said, coming home and spending time. As our kids get older, into the toddler years, sometimes it can be just as little as 15 minutes a day of one-on-one focused time with them. And we can build that attachment with them, or maintain that attachment if you've already got it, but you're back at work. So these are things that we just need to make parents aware of, all these little things that they can do that lead to responsiveness to their kids, so that they can actually continue to parent in a responsive manner, whether they're working parents, whether they're Army parents, whether they are stay-at-home parents, or have 1 kid or 5 kids. There's just none of that precludes being a responsive parent. Right. And I think that that's so important. And I'm so glad that you said that, because it's not about, we'll have to be there 24/7. I mean, I've had parents who are 24/7 parents. They're the stay-at-home parent, and they're not connected at all. No, exactly. They're physically there, but they're not. And I have other parents who work full-time, who are more connected, who really take that time that they're together and really, really connect. And that is such a good, thank you. Cause that's the other part, is like, when we go back to, we talked about, the B's of attachment parenting, you can do all of those things and not be attached. Right. Because it's so much more. You can go in with the mindset. Now it's harder because if you are doing those things, oftentimes there's just a bond, but I've seen people try it. They've written articles about, attachment parenting nearly ruined my life. Right. Well, no, that's not, no, it didn't. Because in all that, you're missing, the real attachment, which is that responsiveness and listening to your baby. Now, the other thing is also parents having to accept that, sometimes the child you have is not the one you want. Right. Yes. And that's, I think, the hardest thing for parents, is that they want the easy child. Right. And some kids aren't. And when you don't, you know what? Yeah, sometimes you have to look at sacrifices. And sometimes it's, no, I can't work 100 hours a week and have a high needs kids and still bond with them because they need more. Right. And so it can't be as simple as we just say, oh, just spend the 10 minutes a day, because that's not going to work for all kids. Nope. And so you really have to be able to respond to your child. And I think that's probably the hardest thing to do in our society, because we lack that support. Absolutely. So we've been talking with Tracy Cassels of Evolutionary Parenting, and we are wrapping up our conversation for today. Next week, we're going to be looking at what it looks like, this attachment idea in real life with little ones and with older ones. And so I hope that you'll tune in. Thank you so much, Tracy. Thank you. For more information, please visit the Consciously Parenting website, consciouslyparenting.com. And if you love this episode, please share this episode.
Thanks so much. See you next time.